Welcome, fellow paranormal seekers, to 3 true apartment ghost stories. Join me as I narrate these chilling experiences. Don't forget to grab a pair of headphones and immerse yourself into these ghostly stories. Now, let the stories begin. So when my friend's brother, whose name is Kevin, was 6 years old, he somewhat remembers playing with a little boy in his apartment. They played together like any typical kids would, laughing, smile, running around, and having fun. However, to his parents' and brother's eyes, it didn't look normal. Yes, it could have been an imaginary friend he was playing with, but to Kevin's parents and brothers, something felt off. He didn't think much of it, he was simply enjoying himself with his friend, as any young kid would. They would play mostly in his apartment hallway. However, when Kevin turned 7, he began to notice that he would see the same kid every so often as he grew older. Perhaps his friend was just busy and that's why he couldn't come over to play as frequently as he used to. Eventually, by the age of 8, the kid no longer showed up to play anymore. It didn't bother him, though he did wonder what had happened to his friend. It wasn't until one night when a little kid appeared in the room while his mom was cleaning. Startled, she got scared and ran out of the room to her husband to seek comfort. She tried to explain how the kid looked, but she couldn't due to the fear she was experiencing. After she was able to calm down a bit, Kevin's parents went to check the room, but there was no trace of the kid anywhere in the apartment. The following day, Kevin's mom wanted to have a talk with him to understand his perspective on how the little boy he used to play with looked like. This is his recollection of how the little boy he used to play with looked like. The kid couldn't have been older than 3 to 4 years old, with a scar on his face. When his mom heard this, she immediately got scared because the way that Kevin described him was the same way that she had seen the little boy who had appeared in her room the night before. She couldn't believe it, however, she understood what the kid was. 3 days later, after his mom's experience, she had to go to work, but she wasn't able to leave her son alone in the apartment. So she had to call his godmother to come over and watch him while she went to work. His godmother agreed to watch over Kevin and she went over, knowing she was only going to be taking care of one kid. Everything was going well as usual. She and Kevin were in the kitchen and she was preparing some food for him to eat. Once she was done, she began walking to the living room, and as soon as she did, she noticed the boy sitting cross-legged there. She was frightened to see him in the living room as she thought that Kevin was the only one she had to take care of. While Kevin was still in the kitchen eating, she nervously called Kevin's mom to let her know that there was a boy in the living room. Hearing this scared her because she had made the conclusion that maybe the boy she saw was only a dream. But after what she just heard from Kevin's godmother, it wasn't a dream after all. After that event with his godmother, the boy suddenly stopped appearing to Kevin and his family altogether. Since then, throughout the years, Kevin began to wonder why the boy appeared to him and eventually appeared to his mom and godmother. The events that happened to his mom and godmother weren't revealed to him until a few years later. When they finally told him who the boy was that he used to play with when he was younger, it didn't shock him too much, as he had a feeling that he was a ghost. Because to him, it seemed that he was the only one who could see the kid when they would play together in the past, as if no one else would be able to see with whom he was playing with. Although the boy doesn't appear to him anymore, Kevin wonders if the boy is still in the apartment, watching him grow up. He believed that his whole life he was playing with an imaginary friend, but it came to be that it was actually the spirit of a boy the whole time. Now at the age of 14, Kevin wants to speak with the boy since he still remembers the times they would play together. Furthermore, he also wonders if the rare occurrences since the age of 8, when he hears someone walking or running in the apartment, could it be his old friend when they were younger? After Kevin told me his story, I couldn't help but wonder if that one time I went to his apartment to test out my ghost equipment and the REM pod lit up while we were there, was it him? Was it Kevin's old friend? This experience happened to my friend Ollie, and it all began on a quiet afternoon at 4 p.m. While chatting with his friend Bennett on Discord, he expressed his desire to play a game of Rocket League. However, feeling exhausted, Ollie decided to take a short nap beforehand. Bennett kindly agreed to wake him up in an hour, and so Ollie set his alarm and drifted off to sleep. When he opened his eyes again, he was greeted by an eerie darkness that had engulfed his room, as if it were the middle of the night. As he rose to his feet, Ollie caught a fleeting glimpse of himself in the mirror. The darkness had seemingly crept into his room unnoticed, casting shadows across every surface. He stumbled toward the light switch, eager to dispel the ominous gloom, but it failed to produce any light. Despite his efforts, the room remained shrouded in darkness. Undeterred, he continued to flick the switch, hoping for a flicker of light. As he did so, he noticed a shape in the corner of his eye. Turning his head, he saw a mysterious figure standing by the closet. It was as if his eyes were playing tricks on him, but the silhouette was unmistakable. Ollie's poor eyesight had never been an issue before, but now it seemed to blur the lines between reality and imagination. Despite the unsettling sight before him, Ollie kept flicking the switch, determined to shed some light on the situation. As Ollie continued to flick the light switch, the figure seemed to mimic his movements, flickering on and off in unison. It was like an eerie dance, a game of hide and seek. And yet, despite the strangeness of it all, Ollie felt no fear or apprehension. He was transfixed by the figure's movements, fascinated by the way it seemed to defy the laws of physics. The figure moved effortlessly around the apartment, disappearing and reappearing in different locations. Sometimes it would stand by the door as if waiting for something. Other times it would hover near the closet, a dark brooding presence in the corner of the room. Ollie watched it all with a sense of detachment, as he was observing a dream or hallucination. And then, in a sudden, jarring moment, the figure materialized right in front of him. Ollie looked up and saw that the figure was taller than him, its features obscured by the darkness. He gazed up at it, his mind blank, his senses overwhelmed by the looming presence before him. For what felt like an eternity, the figure remained there, a silent, imposing force. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished into thin air. Ollie blinked, unsure what he had just witnessed. Had it been real, or had it all been a figment of his imagination? He couldn't say for sure. As he continued to flick the light switch, an uneasy feeling settled into his bones. Suddenly, the figure reappeared in front of him, catching him off guard. A pressure on his head made his vision fade and fear began to grip him. It was the first time during this experience that he had felt scared. Overwhelmed by exhaustion and sleepiness, he made his way towards his bed with the figure still staring at him. As he walked towards the bed, the pressure on his head intensified, draining his life force away. The fear was so intense that he dared not to look back at the figure, fearing it might be the last thing he ever saw. Finally, he slumped onto his bed, completely drained, and fell asleep with the figure still haunting his mind. As he gradually stirred from his slumber, it felt like only a fleeting moment had passed. He rubbed his bleary eyes and gazed over at the light switch, his mind still foggy and disoriented. After a brief pause, he finally summoned the energy to rouse himself from the bed and reached for his phone. With a sense of bewilderment, he checked the time and was shocked to discover that an hour had elapsed since he had dozed off. Recalling that his friend was still on the line, he felt compelled to share the unsettling details of his recent encounter. As he recounted his experience, his friend was visibly taken aback, unable to believe that he had not heard anything during the incident. Soon after, my friend's father arrived home and he recounted the strange episode to him as well. His father was left at a loss for words, leaving my friend to ponder the unsettling nature of his encounter even further. Driven by a growing sense of curiosity, he couldn't help but wonder whether the experience was merely a dream or something more paranormal in nature. I arrived at my friend's apartment with my brother, eager to conduct an EVP session. He had been experiencing strange occurrences for years while living there. Some of these included hearing footsteps at night, experiencing hair pulling, knocks on the walls, and doors opening randomly. His mother even claimed to have been grabbed by an unseen force. Listening to what he had experienced thrilled me with anticipation for what we could capture. As we set up the equipment in my friend's living room, we placed the recorder on the table and positioned the REM pod in the middle of the hallway. The spirit box was set on the floor and we turned off all the lights, relying on the faint light streaming in from the window. Despite our nerves, we were all eager to communicate with any spirits that might be lingering in my friend's apartment. Before we started, my friend shared his experiences of hearing strange noises and feeling an eerie presence in the apartment when he would be alone. This made me even more eager to communicate with any spirits that might be present. We began the session, but after a few minutes of asking questions, we didn't get much from the spirit box. However, when I asked if there are any spirits here, could you please touch the device in the hallway, it would light up and make a noise when touched. I didn't expect anything to happen, but as we were talking about trying the SS method on my brother, I could have sworn I heard the REM pod activating for a split second. I turned quickly to check on it, but there was nothing. Either way, we began to start the SS method. After a few minutes of attempting the SS method, my brother began to hear faint whispers. Intrigued, I started asking if anyone was present in the room with us. To our surprise, a female voice responded. She identified herself as Isabel, claiming to be the owner of my friend's apartment. Isabel insisted that she would not be leaving, and that no one, not even God, could make her leave. Her response caught us off guard. We then asked if there was any other spirits present. That's when my brother heard the voice of a child who identified himself as Eric. Asking Eric if he could touch the REM pod in the hallway, he refused, saying that he was scared of Isabel, whom he referred to as the hanging woman. The mention of a hanging woman made my eyes open wide as I looked towards the hallway, imagining a ghostly figure of Isabel. I continued to try and communicate with Eric and Isabel, and I asked Eric why he was afraid of Isabel. He responded by saying that Isabel tries to hurt him, which is why he doesn't like being around her. This gave us clarity on why he didn't want to go to the hallway. When we asked Isabel why she hurts Eric, my brother reported hearing laughter, which was both surprising and unsettling. After my brother heard Isabel's laughter, he relayed that she claimed to be near the TV. This sent shivers down my spine as I was the one closest to it. I searched around the TV hoping to catch a glimpse of her spirit, but saw nothing. More laughter was heard and Isabel announced that she was no longer just a spirit, but something worse. My friend and I assumed she was trying to scare us. This led to a few minutes of silence until my brother began to hear faint whistling coming through the spirit box. My friend and I looked at each other, puzzled by the sound. After that, Eric asked us for help, stating that he no longer wanted to be with Isabel, and pleaded for us to help him find peace. Isabel laughed at his attempts to ask for help. Eric asked us to pray, but not just for him, he asked us to pray for both him and Isabel. I complied and started to pray. As I prayed, my brother mentioned that Isabel was laughing, which momentarily stopped me, but I continued with the prayer. It seemed Eric was taking a liking to it. However, he mentioned Isabel wasn't. Finishing up the prayer, Eric asked us to say another one. Obliging with his request, I began to pray again. As I finished the second prayer and was about to ask Eric a question, my brother relayed that Eric said he was leaving. I thanked him for communicating with us, and he responded with a faint yes. The voices seemed to stop after that, so we decided to conclude the session with a final prayer. After we finished the session with the final prayer, something strange happened. My friend grabbed the K2 meter and walked down the hallway towards his brother's room. He wanted to see if he could get a spike on the meter, but there was no activity. When he returned to the living room, the REM pod placed in the hallway suddenly activated, indicating a possible presence or change in the temperature. This was odd to us since it hadn't activated at all during the session. After the REM pod stopped, we began hearing a creaking sound coming from his brother's door, as if someone was trying to open it or scratching it. The noise eventually stopped and all three of us looked at each other in confusion. Just as my brother and I were about to leave, my friend turned to me amazed that we were able to communicate with spirits. He had always felt that someone or something was present in the apartment, but he had never imagined that we would get names or evidence from the equipment. As we walked home, I couldn't stop thinking about the experience and the strange occurrences we witnessed. So once I arrived, I listened to the recording from the session, and that's when I heard something strange. I replayed it a couple times and I realized it was a clear whistle sound. I couldn't believe it. I played it over and over again. trying to make sense of it. Was it Eric? Or someone else? It couldn't have been us since my friend remained silent for most of the session, and my brother was nowhere near the recorder. I couldn't be sure, but it was definitely interesting. The thought of us actually capturing a whistle gave me goosebumps, and at that same time, we had caught something during the EVP session. It was clear that something or someone was there with us in the apartment. My friend was right all along. There was definitely something in his apartment that we couldn't see with our own eyes. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the narration and would like to hear more paranormal stories, please feel free to subscribe. Also, if you have your own ghost stories to share, you can submit them to my email, which is provided in the description below. Well, until next time, this is goodbye.